everyone, welcome to Reforming Academia. My name is Victoria.
Hi, I'm Chloe.
We will be talking about women in academia today.
This is when we need like the bum, the drum thing. So for Women's History Month, Vicky and I, again, I feel like all these topics come about because we have complained about this so much offline, and we're really just using this podcast as a way to talk about it in a more public sphere. So Women's History Month is the month of March. Awesome. A lot of what the Women's History Month is trying to talk about is getting us to both recognize, women, especially women in science, that's what we're interested in, but also, acknowledging that the world still isn't perfect. We do live in a patriarchal world, and when that comes to academia, unfortunately, we're still a little bit backwards. So, I don't know, Vicky, where should we even begin with this topic? Should we I don't know, Yeah, do you have any ideas?
I have no idea. I guess we can talk about our experience. I can start off. I mean, my early science career started off with majority of in general my undergrad career with majority of the classes being taught by male professors with very few female professors to begin with, so you already don't have many role models. Then I did my undergraduate research. I would say my lab was very diverse, but then it came to a point where I felt like males PhD student was preferred versus me when it came time for me choosing which lab I was going to do a PhD in. I have to say that my PhD professor was very encouraging for women in STEM, and he understood what it is a disadvantage of being a female in STEM, as his wife also has a PhD. So I think he knew what being a woman in STEM comes to. And I remember him telling me that I should choose female faculty to be on my committee so I could get more well-rounded feedback, and as some feedback that male professors wouldn't be able to give me as being a female in STEM. But then when your department only has 3 females, you're like, well, you want to choose also someone that's going to give you feedback on your research. But then you're out there trying to choose also a female professor, and I'm like, well, kind of not many options. And that's just sad because I feel like each department should be inclusive, and I think that there are so many up and coming female scientists, and I think they should be included in the work field. But one thing my professor did was that he even told me, he was like, you can do anything that a man can do. He was like, there's no way that there should be preferential treatment to male PhD students. It was like, you can do anything that they can do, and don't let any male professor walk all over you.
We had such different PhD experiences, Vicky. Because mine, so I will say, okay, start with the positive is that I was told something similarly when I was told I could pick my committee. Most of it was just my advisor's friends. But I remember in the conversation that we had about, he was like, okay, not them, because I prefer this person that's my friend, even though they don't have anything to do with your research. He did say that I should have at least one woman faculty to understand me better, which I think was his way of, saying they'll be able to give you different feedback. But again, like exactly what you said, there was no female faculty working on anything close to my research. So it's just kind of like the token female. And he agreed, like there are really great up and coming female researchers. But to be frank, and hopefully we're going to discuss this today, is there, heck, let's just dive right into it. There are so many barriers for, I mean, yes, becoming a tenured professor, that's tough in itself, right? To get the funding, to become the postdoc, to publish enough papers, to then get onto the list to become, is it associate faculty? I forget the steps.
Yeah, I think it's associate
So
professor.
before they, okay,
Yeah,
before you
associate
become a tenured.
scientist and associate professor. Yeah.
Okay. So within that's already really tough. I mean, that's why we're seeing so many people drop out to industry and doing other careers with their science degrees completely. But then within that, when you talk about trying to become a tenure track professor, you're working all hours, you're having to give up everything else with your life. And oftentimes, and I heard this so much, is you like, oh, you really want to have a supportive wife who can really take care of things at home. There's never a supportive husband or never even supportive spouse. It was supportive wife. And so then think about the wives who are in the situation of also trying to become tenure track professors. And I knew some of them. They were, well, I should say all of them were awesome. Some of them were awesome. But they were having to bend over backwards because you're also at the time, say, what, 30s to 40s, when you're able to have kids. And it's not easy to have kids at any stage of your life. But that's like the peak, when your body will be able to give you the best chance of success. And somehow women faculty are supposed to, honestly, I've heard certain male professors tell me that if you go tenure track professor, you just give up on your idea of having kids because you're not going to be able to juggle both. And the women that I did know that were able to juggle both, I mean, bless them, they were doing as well as they could, but they were not making it look like a walk in the park. I knew one woman where she came back the week after giving birth with her baby in the bassinet for lab meeting in a lab with a bunch of toxic chemicals because she, I mean, partly didn't want to give up control ownership of what was going on, but two, there was like enough pressure that she felt like she needed to be back. Like, I'm not condoning her showing up in lab, but I will say the department chair for that department was showing up like the month or two after when she should have been on maternity leave to be like, oh, where is she? Is she coming in still? Even though she should be on maternity leave. And then with grad students, whole other, like, the handbook for my university said that it was up to a PI's discretion or advisor's discretion how much maternity paternity leave they could give you. And so there's nothing set in stone. One of my friends who had a baby when he was in grad school, he thought he'd come to the arrangement with his PI that he'd be able to get off a full 6 months. So he wouldn't come into the lab and he'd be able to take off that paternity leave. Awesome. He comes back to the lab and his PI asks, where's your paper? And he's like, what do you mean? I was on paternity leave. And he's like, well, yeah, paternity leave from the lab, but you were still meant to write that paper for me. Just completely, like, that's not understanding, I guess, what taking time off is supposed to entail. Did you guys have anything written about how paternity leave in grad school?
No, and the funny part was that we kind of turned it into a joke that if you get pregnant during like your PhD, you're gonna fast track your PhD. Especially like I even said that I was like, if you look at like the statistics in the program, it was like if you get pregnant like third, early fourth year, you will graduate significantly faster than everyone else in the program because they just don't want to, I guess, deal with you anymore. So they just try to speed up your graduation process. They even try to push your PI to like get you to finish quicker. I don't know what it was.
That's so much better because my university, I'd say it was actually the other way. It was don't get pregnant in grad school because either it's going to delay, say even my male friend delayed his graduation by a couple of years, but they'll master you out really quick if they think, it obviously depends on the PI, but I don't want to name who names, but there were specific advisors who it was a spoken, unspoken rule. If you became pregnant in grad school, you were going to be mastering out.
So we didn't have a master's program. So I guess for us was just to speed you up along the way to get you out of the program. That was the
But
solution.
what happened if someone passed like the qualifying exam, but then didn't go on to get the PhD? Would they still get their master's?
No.
Oh, interesting. Because with mine, it was if you'd done your qualifying exam but then quit afterwards, that's how they forced you to master out. So you just leave and not have anything?
Yeah. So I think they were working on at some point getting the master's accredited, but I don't know what had happened. So most of the cases, it's just you try to finish your PhD. So suck it up for another 2-3 years.
And like, okay, so now we've touched on the pregnancy and the having babies issue. And that's a big problem in itself because I've, again, heard many male faculty saying that a big reason why they don't think women should be tenured faculty is because they're going to have split priorities because they still have to go home and look after their kids and all that. Not like their husbands can do that, God forbid. And having a good stay-at-home wife that'll be able to handle it all. But there's also so much just embedded sexism, especially in the older guard, but even like some of the younger guard, because they've had to learn and adapt in those environments, of just like the culture that what you said about your PI saying a man can do anything a woman can do in the lab. It seems crazy. Like when I talk to people outside of academia, they're like, well, yeah, we're in the 21st century. Of course, a man should be able to pipette just as well as a woman. But when you step foot in many labs, I shouldn't say, well, I feel like I've got what's the opposite of rose tinted glasses? Black tinted glasses, because I was in a probably particularly sexist situation. But my experience has been I have very openly and on many occasions heard that women's PhDs don't matter because all we want to do is settle down and have kids afterwards. That similar to what you were saying about speeding up your PhD if you have a baby, another one I heard is getting married. And either they'll speed up your PhD, or I had a friend who actually got mastered out because she did her, or she was about to do her qualifying exam and got married like the few months before. And so then he was like, okay, we're switching that qualifying defense to a mastering so that you can go off and, have your babies and all that stuff. Did you hear stories like that when you were in grad school?
I think that it was very much dependent, like you mentioned, it depends on the lab and I guess how young your PI is. I think it comes with younger male faculty that's changing because they know that that's not how it should be. Like I said, my PI was very much encouraging in all aspects of life. So I got married during the PhD.
But he was open even to you about like telling you a man should be able, or a woman should be able to do anything a man should be able to do. Like the fact that he was having to still spell that out to you as your boss in the 21st century, like, I just, that shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, and that's because he knew. That's why he said like he knew that seeing other male faculty within the department and how they treated women in their labs. Like he even told me like he was like I want to teach you how to stand up for yourself in these places because a lot of men in academia think that they can walk over women, like speak over them, and during like presentations, like they think that this is all normal. Um, I think it is all over. Like overall, I think we're leading towards the right direction where it is changing, but we're nowhere near.
It's
And in the current
inches more than
political
miles.
climate,
Oh
I,
god, yeah, we're stepping backwards with the political climate. I was just thinking when you said the like talking over, stepping over, taking your ideas, I was very fortunate, I guess, in high school. There was a couple guys who were very, they didn't know it, I guess, at the time, but they would always talk over girls, or like, actually, this goes back to I had a science teacher who, if I or some of the other girls said something, answered a question, and be like, no, 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 no. And then one of those couple guys would say the same thing, just in a slightly different way, and be like, oh, yeah, yeah, see, they said it right. And we'd be like, we just said that. So I learned back in those days in high school, like to make sure I stood up for myself because I didn't get any of that formal sort of training in grad school. And thank goodness I did, because in grad school, I saw that time and time again. I mean, specifically with my own research, the amount of time, I mean, I couldn't even count it for you, that I would come to my PI and say, oh, look at this cool new discovery I found, or like, oh, look, I did this new thing, or I did this staining, and like this happened. And straight up wouldn't believe me until I had the postdoc or the male junior grad student do it again with me side by side, or do separate imaging of it. And it just felt like I'm not a lab tech. I'm here as a PhD capacity. Why are you second guessing my work? In the first couple of years, I was like, okay, maybe it's because I'm a junior grad student, right? But then as I was wrapping up my PhD and this stuff was still happening, I just got so sick of it. And I think I was even more sick of, I don't really blame the younger male grad student because he didn't know how to stand up for himself in the environment. But the male postdoc that was there when I started in the lab, I call him, he's the definition of my mind of a wet lettuce. Someone who knew that the system was benefiting him and did nothing to help other people in the situation. The big one I want to talk about, and this was a bit of a tangent to get there, the girl a year above me in my PhD program, so when I was a first year, she was a second year. When she was a third year, that's when she got married, and she was forced to master out. And I went through we went to the ombudsperson, the grad program director, we did all the things that you're supposed to do. And they were like, yeah, it's out of our hands. You could either start in a new lab from scratch or master out. And she's like, I don't want to start this all over again and do another 5 years. Because to be frank, she was also like, I do want to have kids in the next few years, right? There are considerations that women have to do that men don't have to as much. And the academic circle just isn't as forgiving about that. But this male postdoc, then he was working on the project with the girl who mastered out. He took over her project entirely. But this is where things got really dicey, spicy, whatever you want to call it. They ended up submitting the manuscript to Science. And the first time this got submitted, her name was on it, my name was on it because I'd done experiments for it. This other PhD student girl was on it, as well as a female lab tech and a few other people. I'd read it through, so that's how I knew my name was on it. I was able to review the first draft, etc. Then it came back, they did some revisions, and I didn't really hear that much about it. I was in the midst of working my own paper. And it wasn't until the junior male grad student who just joined the lab at that point, like a couple months in, he was like, "Oh, did you get to read the revision to the science paper?" And I was like, "Sorry, no, I didn't know that had been resubmitted yet. I never got something in my email." He's like, "Oh, that's weird." And he pulls it up on his laptop because he just read it through. And we scroll to the title name and like where the authors are. And my PI had removed all the female names. So myself, that girl got mastered out, that it was her project originally. The female PhD student had already left. The female lab technician, who pretty much did most of the experiments on that paper that the postdoc then analyzed, etc. So all the women were off the paper. And they just added one woman that my PI was friends with. She was the only woman on there. Didn't actually do many experiments for it, that I understand. I jaw on the floor because one, I was really excited about going to science publication. I'd helped with many of the experiments, and the fact that the postdoc, this wet lettuce, as I call him, was around the whole time. I was helping with all his experiments, his ordering, etc. Did not even have the the dignity to like tell me to my face any of this. And I think he knew that I was going to find out because he'd been avoiding me those past couple days. I hunt him down on his way. He's like running out to lunch, and I really do say running because I'm like, hey, so and so. I'll call him Wet Lettuce. I don't want to dox him. And he's like purposely like he can hear me. And he just keeps walking, so I'm running after him. I stop him in the hallway, and he's like, "Hey, what's up? Just heading to lunch. Can we do this later?" And I was just like, "Just a quick question for you. Why was my name removed?" And he's like, "Oh, the PI didn't tell you." And I was like, "Well, no, but two, you wouldn't expect him to tell me because it's your paper. You're the first author." And he just stood there, like, again, wet lettuce. And I was like, "Okay, are you trying to say I didn't do enough for the paper?" He's like, "Oh, I suppose we could make that argument." I was like, "Okay, so let's just separate me for a second. What about the other girls? The one that literally was her project to start with?" No answer. It was literally like, and then walked out for lunch. And then came back from lunch and expected me to do more ordering and experiments for him. I was like 3 months out to him leaving the lab at this point, and I straight up look at him and I'm like, "I'm not on your paper, so I'm not doing anything for you." That was like end all. My PI never brought it up to me. I went to the graduate program director about this too. She was like, "Yeah, yikes, this is bad. I guess save it in case it gets published." But that was it. And the fact that like this was just such a normal, the grad program director couldn't do anything about it. Sorry, it's getting to a really long story. Just to show you, like, there truly is no rhyme or reason except that they think that they can because they can, and then they do. And unless we have enough people, I don't know, talking about it, changing it, things aren't gonna get better.
I I totally agree. I had one case during my PhD where I told you I was working on a co-project and it was with another lab. And I was doing an experiment in that lab. And that PI comes into the lab and he's asking me what I'm working on, and I'm telling him what I'm working on, and I'm telling him the rationale about it. And then he's like, starts screaming at me. And I was just like, I guess, frozen. At that point, I've never encountered where any PI just blatantly screaming at me for no reason. So I'm out there trying to process on like how to like answer him back. And let me tell you, the lab, the whole floor is full. Everyone's just ignoring it. The dude is just screaming at me.
No one stood up for you?
So actually, because he's screaming so loud on the other end, was a postdoc who was at some point trained by my PI also, like my PhD PI. So she gets there and then she's like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Well, I told her to do blah, 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 blah." And I guess and she was like, "Well, she literally is telling you that she's doing exactly the way that you're asking her to do it. So what's the problem?" He has nothing to say, and he just walks out of the lab. And what pissed me off is that I'm like, would you scream at your male graduate student? Which I've never in the whole entire time heard him screaming at any male PhD student.
It's the level of respect. Like, and because also a really good example of it. Do you remember when Love Hypothesis, that book, became really big?
Mm-hmm.
Did you read that book?
Mm-hmm.
Did you
I
like
think
it?
I have it on my shelf over
Stop
there.
it! You haven't. So did you like it?
I would say that yes and no. Like if I wasn't, I think of the whole consensus that if I wasn't in the STEM like field, like as a romance, I thought it was a good book. But knowing everything behind STEM, I could see why people would not like it.
So I read it, I guess, but I was very like, this is such a messed up, like, academic. The premise for people who haven't read Love Hypothesis is it's a grad student falls in love with her. It's not her direct advisor, right? It's like an advisor on a committee, I guess. But they're in the same department.
They were like a
And
professor from her department. I think that was the
yeah,
whole.
and their meet cute is she's working in lab late at night, and she like runs into him and kisses him. I think is the whole thing. And this is like so many problems. But I will say that the amount of stories I've heard in academia where there are romances between the PI and the lab tech or grad students, and like the what do you call it, the power imbalance. I've seen so many of those, or like a PI, male PI who marries his postdoc, and then the postdoc just keeps working on the lab forever. I just think it's such a messed up power imbalance. You're not allowed to do that in industry. Why are we allowed to still get away with it in academia?
There was a professor at my university who married a grad student in our program. So
Another juicy tea. There was a PI, or two PIs that were married, man, woman, and I think it was our department, similar departments. And then he fell for his postdoc, divorced his wife, who they were like, collaborating on projects and stuff, married the postdoc. Now they jointly run a lab. That ex-wife is still at the same university. And the kicker, I think this is so hilarious. One of my friends didn't realize all this drama because this had happened like 10 years prior, and had the ex-wife and the guy that's married to the new postdoc on like the committee together. And the first time that they met was the qualifying exam. And she was like, yeah, it was a really awkward qualifying exam. And then the PI afterwards is like, yeah, because I should have realized when I saw those names together. They haven't talked in years. And it's like, oh.
But there are so many also, like, speaking of that, I remember a couple of years back, I'm not sure, I just want to mention the professor's name, but it was like a huge PI, like huge scientist out in the field who was like bringing up like I'm talking about big, like some fundamental discoveries made type professor. For years, he had like inappropriate interactions with students in his lab, but the university kind of brushed it under the rug. And then someone finally like fought for it, and it was like on all the headlines because I think she went to like suing the university, and the PI ended up no one wanted to hire him after that. And he ended up having to like, he's now I think in Europe.
He got hired though. I know the story you're talking about. He did get
Yes.
hired again by a different
Yes, he did get
university.
hired again, yeah. But the fact is, like, how many years has spent like just the university, how complicit they were in all of this.
That I think is the most upsetting part to me, is they say that we don't need the HR and all that because we're not employees as grad students. But then there's no oversight for any of this crazy behavior. And I think from my own personal experience, because I tried all the avenues I could, and that's when you agree the complicity, because it makes them look bad, I guess, to recognize the issue, but then they just let the issue keep on going. And I think the worst part of it all is how much you have to fight in order to get that bare minimum. And I mean, speaking from my own experience here, is we have tried for years. I mean, since halfway through my PhD, when that girl got mastered out, we were like, these are the warning bells are going off everywhere. Why is the school not doing anything? And sure, behind closed doors, they'll say, this is bad, this is so bad, blah, blah, blah. We're women too, so we'll empower you, blah, blah. And then they aren't doing jack shit. And then even when you get out, the only way to properly hold them accountable to make change happen is doing a lawsuit, which costs a crap ton of money. And if you're someone, I mean, one, if you're in academia, you probably just can't do it. One, you're not getting paid enough. But two, there's that worry about the academic stain that you'll have from trying to speak out against the discrimination and the abuse. The schools are, I mean, I get it on the one hand, they don't want to make it easy because you should be able to sue a school for frivolous whatever. But at the same time, there should be better ways to hold a school accountable if they fucked up your education. Like, frankly, that's what I see it with my situation, is I had a subpar PhD education because I had an advisor who did not value my training as much as my male counterparts, frankly. And that's not the way it should be in the 21st century.
I agree.
I like
I
that.
have nothing to add.
Awesome. Is there anything else we should talk about? Oh gosh, I feel like we've been trying to aim for the 20 minutes, and I feel like we haven't made a single 20-minute episode yet.
Well, maybe after we cut some parts out, maybe we'll be closer to 20 minutes.
That's true. I might cut out my whole talking about the wet lettuce guy. He was a big wet lettuce, though. Actually, maybe I should we tie into the spill the tea corner now?
Hmm.
Do you want to read it this time, or you want me to do it?
You can do it.
We have a very applicable spill the tea, what they wanted a topic for us to cover about, and we chose our topic independently. But I really like the angle that this person wrote in as. So he says, maybe this is a bit more of a deeper discussion, but as a male scientist, I think it's really important to address. Men in academia need to be better upstanders to abusive behavior and more vocal in support, especially when so much toxic behavior in academia is usually perpetrated by male staff towards women. We're seeing a lot of progress, of course, but it'd be good to hear what you think men in academia can do to better support their non-male colleagues when it comes to bad behavior. First off, we need a round of applause for this guy for recognizing that, because I completely agree. I do think, academia is toxic in itself, but I think a lot of that toxicity is because the old white men in power can use that power imbalance to hurt women.
I agree. I think also you cannot just be a bystander. Like, if whether you're a male or a female, that you should be speaking up if you're seeing mistreatment happening. I think a lot of the times it continues on because other people just like look the other way and pretend like it's not happening. I think that once everyone recognizes that it is everyone's responsibility to ensure that academia is a safe place for all skin colors, all genders, all ethnicities, I think that we will be start moving into the right direction.
I do want to recognize, like, I agree with this guy. It's tough when you're seeing someone be mistreated and you're like afraid of speaking up because you don't want it to end up hurting you. Especially in academia, it's like it's so hard. Oops, sorry, I got a cat. It's so hard to directly pinpoint, like, say the oh, he got this preferential project because he's a man versus woman, or this guy got it because he decided not to speak up about how this woman was being treated while I did. There's a lot of like gray area of they can hide it behind other stuff. We need to be willing to speak up about it more, because if everyone in your lab recognizes that this isn't okay, then it's easier to work on building that culture. Versus if just one person speaking up and the rest of that lab stays silent, then that one person would be really easy to ostracize. And I'm going to go back, sorry, again to my PhD lab experience and this wet lettuce of a postdoc, because he was in a position of authority. He was the number 2 after the PI. He had all the authority there to say if he didn't like how we were being treated or us getting kicked off certain papers because we were women, he could have said that. He could have pushed back. And so I think especially those people that are in more senior positions of authority, say the postdocs, you are so much of like the vibe or the culture check for your lab that you need to be proactive in making sure that culture is one that is supporting all the people in the lab and not just the other white men there.
I agree with you.
What advice do we have for men who want to support non-male colleagues? Is it really just speaking up about it? I guess being willing to go to the ombudsperson or HR, I think that's a really big thing as well. Because there's so much that, like, when I was going to the ombudsperson HR, it's so easy to be like, oh, that's just what you're saying, or that's what women are saying. And sadly, I don't know, better or worse, it means a lot when you've got a man also coming and be like, yo, this is not cool. Like, I've been seeing what's going on, and I can clearly tell there's a difference between how I'm being treated versus the women in the lab. And I think it turns the he said, she said into a much more rounded debate.
I think it's just, like you said, willing to speak up, as also if you are going to be a professor in academia, knowing that men and women are not treated equally. You're right away knowing that the training for your female staff might differ slightly than for your male staff, that you're going to need to ensure that your female students are going to get the right resources. Like I said, like my PI encouraging, like, not just because they're female, but female PIs that are going to be related to your project. You can reach out to university. Like my PI wanted me to choose potentially someone that was a female, but outside of my university that was going to be similar to my, like, to what I was working on. So knowing that you might have to go an extra mile for your female students.
I think female PIs that have made it to that professorship status, going out of their way more to recognize and help female grad students. Because to be frank, I didn't really get that during grad school. Like, I did reach out to a few female PIs, and it felt a lot more of the academic culture. Well, I dealt with it, went through it, so should you. And sure, they felt sympathetic at times, but they weren't actually wanting to make a change because they were already burnt out, they were tired, overworked, dealing with their own lives, navigating their own kids. Like, we just don't have time. And I get that, but also you can't be in that position of authority and say that the world sucks and just be like, yeah, but I'm just going to keep on going like it because I've made it here and I've kind of made my own little quiet niche. So I guess being willing to speak about it, being willing to make space and like talk about it openly, especially if you're in a position of authority. Finding mentors, I think that's a really big one. Finding good mentors, and then finding colleagues as support. I think it's really culture dependent. Like, some labs, some departments are going to be way better about it than others. And I think the worst cultures for sexism and gender discrimination come when you've got maybe only one or two PIs that are like old tenured farts who've just been able to do the same old for years. And because no one has questioned that status quo, they're able to, sadly, not even just like keep on with it, but progressively it gets worse. And then it gets to the point where it's so bad, people are like, well, now if we call it out, then, the whole university looks bad. So it's also about nipping it in the bud earlier. Maybe it also goes back to having more checks and balances too.
I went into an all-female lab, so we only had 2 male undergrads, and it kind of became into a joke at some point that my lab was an all-female lab and my
That's
husband's
pretty
lab was an
baller,
all-male
honestly.
lab. So
Yeah, I think that's pretty baller that you had a whole female lab.
I think overall, I don't know before me, I don't know how the vibes were there, but me and my lab mate got along very well. She's actually at UM right now, a postdoc. But for my undergrad, my PhD, and my postdoc, I think all of those environments were very inclusive, but I think it reflects a lot on the PIs that I had in general. But I know, yeah, and they were all men. So all three of my undergrad, my PhD, and my postdoc were all male PIs.
And inherently by itself, that like the all male, all female thing isn't like an issue. I think it's more the culture and how the culture works out with men and women. I remember one of the culture things in my lab, I would say unspoken then became a spoken rule, was women in the lab were meant to leave by 6 p.m. at the latest because, seriously, it was partly the dark stuff, but it was also, and I literally quote, so you can go home and make your husband dinner. And I will say I milked this because the men were meant to stay super late. I shouldn't say sweet, but sometimes like 9, 10 p.m. Well, we were told, like, give it to the men and then leave. But then the flip side, that would sometimes be taken back on us if we hadn't gotten enough data or something for the week. Like, well, why haven't you done more? And it's like, well, I thought I wasn't meant to be in the lab that late. It's like, well, you need to be working all hours like I did in grad school, But then the other weird double standard was we could leave 6 p.m. if we needed to go home and make our husband's dinner. But God forbid I had a social engagement in the evening, and my PI would know about them. Not new, but like the first few times it happened, say we'd have, because we never had scheduled lab meetings. I think I said that in another episode. It would just be like some point in the week he'd show up and you'd have like a 2-3 hour meeting in his office where if you're a woman, you're not going to be talking about research. So, I don't know, it hits 5 p.m. and I'm like, hey, I've got a dinner reservation with one of my girlfriends. And it's at 6 p.m., so I need to get moving. If I ever said it was with one of my friends, he'd say, you need to cancel it. And then he'd end up keeping me to like 6, 7 p.m. If I said it was a dinner reservation with my husband, it would be like, oh yeah, madame, you need to go right away. Oh yeah, sorry, something else I haven't mentioned is he called all his female students madame, 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 even when we specifically asked him not to. And all the men, of course, got called by their first name.
But that's what I'm saying. It stems from the university. Like at some point, like they need to stand up for their students and their employers.
That's actually a really big thing is if you're a tenured professor and say this gender discrimination or anything else that your PI does against you, you can't actually sue your PI directly. You have to sue the school. And at first I thought this was crazy. I'm like, you don't want to go up against the big university. It's way more funding than an individual professor. But it actually does make sense because when they've let the gender discrimination go on for years, it is the fault of the university and not just the individual professor. Because they could have nipped this in the bud 10, 15 years ago when the first PhD student talked about it. And no, they decided to brush it all under the rug as he progressively got worse and worse as he realized he could get away with more and more. All right, I feel like I'm probably gonna have to cut half of this because I'm feeling very spicy right now, and then me later when I'm editing, like, oh, that was a bit too spicy to say.
I hope you're gonna keep the lettuce guy.
Oh, I'm gonna say this again because I know we already said it. Even if you think you are going to beat the system. You will not. I am sorry. I was that same situation like 3 years ago. You will not. The system is there and designed to, I don't know, to be a trap. It's designed not to help us, unfortunately, as students. All right. Should we? Do you have something more optimistic to say? I feel like I'm just going more and more pessimistic here.
I
Trying to
think
end
I
on
would
a
want to
positive
end
note.
it on the positive note. I think that we are changing as you look through, I guess, the recent years with the old farts going into retirement and the new generation of scientists coming in and taking these academic positions. I think we are seeing a huge change on how women are treated in STEM, and I think it's going into a positive direction. Like I said, like with my PI and what I've seen through my postdoc with younger PIs and how they treat female scientists and PhD students is significantly different from what I was seeing when I was even younger as an undergrad, when I was myself starting in a lab and more than 10 years ago. It's huge difference from back then to now. So I think we are moving into the right direction. I think we've made already a huge progress, but I think we need to keep going. I think there's still so much room to improve.
Agreed.
Positive
Be the
note.
culture change.
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. All right. On those bombshells, thanks so much for tuning in. We're Reforming Academia with your hosts, Chloe and Vicky. All right. See you next time.
Bye bye, guys.
Science is for everyone.